Are you really trusting that old mechanic again? Marjorie scoffed as the flag rope clicked outside the church garage, dust drifting through a cold Idaho beam. People mocked him from the doorway, just a joke they pressed, yet Al stayed completely still, the pause settling between two quiet breaths. Then his rescue coin turned once in his palm, catching a thin shift of light while the room answered with a heartbeat like hush. Still quiet. Men leave echoes too, and this one began with a coin anyway. The late afternoon light slanted across the church garage, catching dust in long, slow streaks. It was the kind of Idaho November day when the air held a bite and every sound traveled just a little farther than usual. A few folks from the HOA had wandered in, boots scraping on the concrete coat still zipped. They weren't here to help, just to watch. Marjorie Hale planted herself in the center of the room, arms folded like she was about to inspect a parade. "Why don't you try fixing that old heater, Al? Come on, just for fun." A couple of people behind her chuckled. "Yeah, give it a try, old man. It'll be a good joke." Al Mercer didn't flinch. 62 years old, retired Coast Guard mechanic, steady as cold steel after a night storm. He simply looked at the battered heater tucked against the wall. Its metal casing was flecked with rust, its wiring older than half the congregation. Tommy stood near the doorway, hands dug into his hoodie pockets. 13 thin as a rake eyes, always paying attention, even when he pretended they weren't. He glanced from the adults to Al, trying to understand why this felt wrong. "You folks done?" Al asked quietly. Marjorie grinned. "Oh, we're just getting started." Al crouched beside the heater. The movement lifted his sleeve just enough for a dull glint of metal to show a small Coast Guard rescue coin edges worn smooth. Tommy squinted, leaning closer, without realizing it. The heater didn't look like much a dented shell, a coil that hadn't glowed in years, a switch that stuck halfway through its travel. The kind of machine people gave up on long before they even tried. "Sir?" "What's that coin?" Tommy whispered. Al didn't look up. He just smiled softly, a corner of the mouth kind of smile that seemed to carry a story behind it. "Just a reminder, son." Outside, the faint sound of spoons tapping mugs drifted from the diner across the road. Someone was laughing, someone else talking about the high school football game, the kind of small-town murmur that never fully stopped. The garage felt quieter in comparison, like the air held its breath. "Think he can even turn it on," someone in the back said. "Please, that thing hasn't worked since before I was born." Al reached for the heater panel, but didn't touch it yet. He just studied it like he was listening or remembering something the rest of them had forgotten. Tommy watched the man's eyes, steady and focused, not bothered at all by the snickering behind him. Then came a long, slow, silent beat. A soft ray of sunlight slipped through the dusty window and fell over the heater's dull metal surface. The dust glimmered in the glow, and for a brief second, it looked not like an old machine, but like something waiting to wake up. Something that had once mattered. Tommy felt a strange shiver, a sense that this moment wasn't really about a heater at all. "Well," Marjorie finally prodded, "any day now." Al exhaled, calm as a man checking tide charts. "We'll see what we can do, folks. Just give it a minute." But the crowd wasn't listening. They were laughing at him, not with him. And Tommy, for the first time, saw it clearly. By mid-morning the next day, the church garage felt colder than the November air outside. The heater sat open on the concrete floor, its insides exposed, like a puzzle missing half its pieces. Al Mercer knelt beside it, sorting through the old screws and brittle wires laid out on a hardware cloth he'd unrolled earlier. Tommy hovered at a distance, backpack still on. "Did it get worse overnight?" Al shook his head. "No, son. It's just old. old things don't break overnight. People just notice them later. He lifted one of the central components, a warped ignition plate. He turned it under the light, studying the darkened edges. The plate needed replacing, but a matching one hadn't been made in 20 years. He could craft something close, but without a stabilizer coil, it wouldn't last long. Footsteps clicked across the garage. Marjorie again. "How's our mechanic doing? Any progress?" Al kept his eyes on the parts, working through it. Marjorie gave a short laugh. "Maybe we should call someone younger, someone who's up to date." Tommy stiffened. "Ma'am, he knows what he's doing." She blinked, surprised. "Well, I'm sure he's trying." Al didn't react. He simply set the plate aside, brushed dust from his palms, and reached into his pocket. The faint metallic click drew Tommy's attention. Al's rescue coin turning slowly between his fingers like a metronome. "Why do you flip it like that?" Tommy asked. Al offered a small shrug. "Helps me think. Helps me count time too." Another beat. Dust swirled in a shaft of cold sunlight. Then Al rose, grabbing a small package wrapped in brown paper. "I need to drop this off. Won't be long." The post office line stretched almost to the door. Folks tugged at scarves, stomping cold out of their boots. A gust of early November wind rolled in each time the door opened, carrying the smell of pine and the distant clatter from the diner. Al stepped into line package tucked under his arm. Inside were dried flowers, something he ordered every year, the kind his late wife had loved. The clerk knew without asking. A man behind him muttered loud enough for the whole aisle to hear, "I heard that church heater's still dead." Should have gotten someone who can actually fix things. Al didn't turn. "Someone will take care of it, you know." The man scoffed. "Hope so. That place is freezing." Al's fingers found the coin, again turn, stop, turn. A measured rhythm, not anxious, not defensive. Tommy, who had followed a minute later, saw that movement from the doorway and paused. It didn't look like the gesture of a man ashamed or confused. It was precise, almost practiced, like timing a procedure. Tommy swallowed. Maybe all those people were wrong about him. Back in the garage, Al unpacked a small set of tools and knelt again beside the heater. "We'll need to improvise," he said. "Can you?" Tommy asked. Al gave a gentle nod. "We'll see, but every fix starts the same way, one honest look and one steady breath." Tommy noticed the coin resting by Al's hand, now not hidden. And for the first time, the boy understood Al wasn't lost. He was preparing. The church storage shed sat behind the main building, half swallowed by winter weeds and a sagging fence. Inside, the air smelled of old hymn books varnish and the faint trace of pine cleaner from years ago. Dust motes drifted lazily in the narrow beams of November light. Al Mercer eased the door open and motioned Tommy inside. "Mind your step. Some of this stuff's older than me." Tommy laughed under his breath. "Not possible, sir." Al raised an eyebrow, amused, and started rummaging through a stack of metal crates. The tools inside were mismatched, some donated, some forgotten, most resting far past their prime. What they needed was a metal plate sturdy enough for the heater's ignition chamber. "We're looking for something about this size," Al said, spreading his fingers in a rough rectangle. "Strong but not brittle. Steel if we're lucky." Tommy knelt beside another crate, pushing aside brackets and screws. "Did you ever win that coin in some contest?" Al paused for a second, then chuckled softly. "Not exactly, kid." "So, like an award, it's a reminder, that's all." He didn't elaborate. Prop timeline required the truth. Stay folded for now like a sealed envelope waiting for the right hands and the right moment. Tommy didn't press, but his eyes lingered on the coin. When Al's jacket shifted its edge, catching a sliver of light steady and deliberate, rather than for show. Outside, footsteps crunched in the gravel. 2 HOA members passed by the shed window, talking louder than necessary. "He's been tinkering for days. Heater's still dead. Told you man doesn't know what he's doing." Tommy's jaw tightened. He glanced at Al, expecting a flinch or at least a sign of irritation. But Al remained calm, sorting scrap, with the patience of someone who'd weathered louder storms. "Doesn't that bother you?" Tommy asked quietly. "People saying things like that." Al lifted a piece of metal, tapped it gently, then set it aside. "Sun folks say a lot of things when they're cold or worried. Doesn't make them bad, just makes them human." He held up a thin steel plate. "Too flimsy. Won't hold heat." Tommy handed him another. "What about this?" Al tested its bend, measured its edge with the pad of his thumb, and nodded with approval. "Now that's promising. See the grain here? Means it was cut clean. No stress fractures." Tommy leaned in, studying the lines Al pointed out. "How do you know all that?" Al smiled. "Quiet work teaches you to pay attention. Noise teaches you less than you think." They spent the next few minutes measuring, comparing, and selecting the best pieces. Al showed Tommy how to gauge thickness with a fingertip, how to check for warping against a straight edge, and how to set aside anything that looked good but felt wrong. A lesson Tommy realized applied to more than metal. The shed's silence settled around them, broken only by their quiet conversation and the soft clink of tools. It felt steady, like a bridge forming between two very different lives. Finally, Al tucked the chosen plate under his arm. This might just do the trick. "Ready?" Tommy nodded, heart beating a little faster for reasons he couldn't name. As they stepped outside, the cold wind swept across the gravel. And then the mini-cliff. Tommy felt something big was about to break open. The church hall filled early that evening. Veterans Day had a way of gathering the whole town. Old uniforms, brushed clean, paper poppies pinned to coats, kids holding flags. They barely understood, but waved with pride. Folding chairs stretched row after row under the yellow glow of overhead lights. The November chill lingered inside despite everyone's breath and body heat. At the front of the room, the old heater sat quiet, its metal frame patched and reassembled. Al Mercer stood beside it, hands loosely at his sides, waiting. Tommy lingered a few seats back, watching everything with wide, alert eyes. Marjorie stepped up to the microphone, smile sharp as frost. "Well, folks, looks like our A-10 pilot isn't firing today." A few chuckles scattered through the crowd. Firing the way she said it carried no violence, only a jab at capability, a metaphor questioning whether Al had any spark left. SM lock remained intact, firing equals determination, not weapons. Tommy felt heat rise to his face. He looked at Al, expecting hurt, but Al didn't move. He simply reached into his jacket pocket and drew out the rescue coin, its surface catching the stage lights. The room hushed. Al placed the coin gently on the heater's upper panel, like setting down a promise, and rested his fingertips on the coin for a steady second. The gesture felt ceremonial, a quiet oath. Then he reached for a single adjustment screw near the ignition chamber. It was the piece he and Tommy had shaped in the shed ground until it matched the plate's groove perfectly. Tommy leaned forward. "Sir, is it ready?" Al didn't answer. He inhaled once, slow and steady, like a man timing the tide. Then he nudged the screw just a hair. Barely more than a breath's worth of movement. At first, nothing happened. Then a tremor traveled through the heater's frame, not a literal engine roar, but a warm, rising hum, as if the room itself exhaled after holding tension too long. A soft pulse of heat drifted out, brushing against shins and knees in the front row. Someone gasped. Another whispered, "No way." The hum grew not louder, not mechanical, but fuller, like something waking after a long winter. It carried the symbolic weight of an engine coming alive, a promise reigniting a story, finishing what it once began. The air shifted. People straightened. Conversation stopped mid-breath. Tommy's voice trembled in awe. "Sir, you just started the whole place." Al stepped back, letting the warmth spread. He didn't smile, not fully, but his eyes softened the way a horizon softens when night gives up its hold. Marjorie's expression cracked, first surprise slipping through the practiced confidence. "Well, I guess it just needed a lucky day," she managed. But the rest of the room saw what she pretended not to. Al hadn't gotten lucky. He had known exactly what he was doing. A man in the second row whispered, "We misjudged him. Badly." Another nodded slowly. That's skill. That's real skill. The heater glowed faintly along its seams, warm enough now that people removed scarves and unzipped coats. The Veterans Day program paused itself. The heat, the hum, and the man beside it were suddenly the center of gravity. Tommy stepped closer to Al. "They were wrong about you. All of them." Al rested a hand on the boy's shoulder. "Son, folks come around in their own time. What matters is staying steady until they do." The crowd watched them, some ashamed, some reverent, all quiet. And in that silence, something shifted in the room, as sure and undeniable as warmth on a cold night. By the next morning, word had spread faster than the November wind rolling down from the ridge. Folks who hadn't been at the Veterans Day service were already asking about the heater story voices, low curious, a little embarrassed. The church hall, once chilly, now held a steady warmth that felt almost symbolic, not just heat, but acknowledgement settling into the walls. Tommy stood near the front pew, hands clasped around Al's rescue coin. Al had pressed it into his palm when the crowd started surrounding him the night before, saying only, "Hold this for me, son." It wasn't a gift, Tommy knew that much, but it was trust. The kind you didn't mishandle. Marjorie hovered by the doorway, looking smaller than usual, her confidence shaken loose. "Tommy, is Al around?" she asked, avoiding eye contact. "He's checking the wiring one more time, just making sure it stays running." She nodded, fiddling with her scarf. I may have been too quick to judge." Tommy didn't answer. He simply let the silence stretch, giving her room to sit with her own words. Justice here wasn't about scolding. It was about letting truth land in its own weight. Two older men approached and paused beside Tommy. "Kid, that's your mentor over there?" one asked, chin lifting toward Al. "Yes, sir." "Well, we judged him wrong. Happens more than we admit, especially with quiet folks." The other man let out a breath that sounded like an apology. "Good thing he didn't give up on this place like some of us gave up on him." Their honesty was soft but firm, the kind that came from realizing a mistake and choosing to grow from it. Tommy felt the coin warm in his palm. Prop echo, the second resonance of a story not fully told yet. A few minutes later, Mrs. Langford from the library board shuffled in with her notebooks. "Tommy, sweetheart, I heard you wrote a little note last night. Mind if I see it?" Tommy blinked. "It wasn't much, just something I wanted Mr. Mercer to read." She held out her hand gently. Sometimes small things belong on big boards. He passed her the folded slip of paper. She opened it with care. Your kindness kept the church warm. The words trembled in the air. Simple, honest, shaped by a boy who understood warmth wasn't measured by the wattage of a heater. Mrs. Langford pressed a hand to her chest. We need this on the community service board. People forget kindness unless someone writes it down. Nearby, the veteran choir was rehearsing for the evening gathering. Their voices drifted into the hall, low harmonies, soft and steady like boots moving in rhythm across a deck. The sound wrapped around the room with a kind of shared dignity. Al finally stepped inside, wiping dust from his hands. Everything holding steady, Tommy asked. Steady as we can hope for. Marjorie approached him slowly. Al, I owe you an apology. A real one. Al met her eyes without pride or resentment. You don't owe me anything. Just remember the heat didn't come from luck. It came from a little faith and a lot of patience. She looked down. Well, thank you. Truly. For a moment, the entire hall felt held in a gentle pause, a justice that didn't humiliate, just corrected. Healing without spectacle. Tommy walked to Al and returned the coin. I kept it safe. Al closed the boy's fingers around it again. Keep it a little longer, son. You understood it before they did. The choir's harmony deepened sunlight, warming the wooden floorboards, as if the building itself agreed the town was learning. Finally, who had been watching over them all along. The Veterans Day weekend eased into a calm Sunday afternoon. The kind where the town moved slower, softer, like it remembered something important. Warmth from the newly revived heater drifted through the church hall in steady waves. Along the back wall beneath the hymn numbers and the framed photographs of past volunteers hung a new plaque, small brass and quietly proud. For the man who made the cold warm again. People paused when they passed it, their eyes rounding with recognition. No speeches, no dramatic unveiling. Just a plaque screwed into the wall with two simple brass bolts, steady and unpretentious, much like the man it honored. Tommy stood in front of it now, the rescue coin resting in his palm. He had kept it safe, just like Al asked. But today felt different. Today felt like returning something that didn't belong to him. Al stepped beside him, boots soft against the wooden floor. Looks nice, doesn't it? Tommy nodded. They should have put it up years ago. Al gave a gentle laugh. Things show up when they're meant to, not before. The boy hesitated, then held out the coin. Sir, I think this belongs with you again. Al closed Tommy's hand back around it. Keep it. Tommy blinked. But why? Al's voice was warm, steady, the kind that traveled farther than volume ever could. Because you're the one who'll start things after me. The word start hung between them, soft but unmistakable. Title echo complete. Tommy looked down at the coin, then at the man who had never once bragged about what it meant. A man the town had misjudged, until the moment a heater hummed with quiet strength. Outside, the late afternoon breeze swept leaves across the church steps. The sound of the porch swing creaking drifted from the parsonage next door. The metallic church bell chimed lazily, like it didn't mind being late. Al sank onto the porch swing, letting its gentle sway settle his breath. Tommy sat beside him, the coin tight in his grip. You ever gonna tell me what this coin really is? Tommy asked. Al looked out across the yard where families walked home, their scarves fluttering in the wind. Maybe one day. But right now, it's yours to understand, not mine to explain. There was no arrogance in his tone, no hint of mystery for attention. Just truth, clean and simple. Two neighbors walked past the fence lifting hands in quiet greeting. Yesterday they might have walked quicker, eyes averted. Today they paused. "Evening, Al. Thanks again for everything. Town feels warmer with you around." Al only nodded. Justice acknowledged quietly without ceremony. Tommy studied the plaque through the slanting light. "Engines don't roar for nothing, do they?" Al smiled, eyes softening with memory. "No, son. They roar when someone decides it's time to bring something back to life." The porch swing rocked. The wind carried the faint echo of choir voices warming up inside the church, low harmonies drifting across the yard like a blessing. Tommy slipped the coin into his pocket, holding it like a promise. Al watched him the way a good man watches the next generation take its first steady steps. And in that easy golden hour, justice felt complete, not loud, not showy, just right. The porch swing eased beneath him as the late afternoon wind carried the soft hum of the choir warming up inside the church, and Al watched the light settle over the small plaque that read, "For the man who made the cold warm again." Still, he felt no need for praise. Kindness, he believed, worked best the way a winter lamp glows in a window, steady, small, and seen when someone needs it most. Tommy stepped closer, the rescue coin in his hand, catching one last glint of sun, and for a breath the boy could sense what the whole town finally understood. Quiet work can move a place forward. And as the evening deepened, Al's gentle smile held the town in a warm reminder that engines don't come alive unless someone chooses to start them.